Welcome to the Cass Health Podcast, the show where we hope to connect our community with healthcare information that's relatable, understandable, and useful to your life, and where you get to know better the neighbors providing your care here. I'm your host, Ann McCurdy, and today we're talking about perimenopause with OB/GYN Dr. Marcela Pineda. Before we get started, 2 quick disclaimers. First, the comments in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Cass Health. Second, the information in this podcast is not intended to be construed as personal medical advice. Always consult your primary care provider with your questions and concerns regarding your health. Welcome. Thank you so much for making time with us today. So we'd like to start out by getting to know you a little bit. So, Dr. Pineda, where are you from?
I am from Central America. I have lived in Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica a few times, back and forth, before moving into the States.
So cool. We're glad you're here. And favorite hobbies?
I like hiking, and recently I have started taking painting. It just relaxes me.
Oh, that's so neat. Are you doing like oil painting or acrylic painting?
Acrylic. I am looking forward to start with watercolor.
Oh, neat. What a great hobby.
Yes, and it helps quiet like the mind and relax. I tried doing crochet and it was a failure. I needed to count too much and be too aware of it.
Do the kids like to paint with you?
No.
No?
No. And I try to hide the paints from them.
Maybe in the future then.
Yes.
If you're cooking dinner to impress, what are you making?
Coffee.
Oh.
So I am not a great cook. And I'm not bad cook. It's just that my husband is fantastic at it, but I can make an awesome coffee. So I will put all of my effort in giving you the best cup of coffee you've ever had.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm coming over for coffee. I love coffee. So, pets at home?
I have 1 cat and 1 dog.
How about a favorite holiday?
Oh, Thanksgiving. For sure.
Okay, why Thanksgiving?
Well, it's not a holiday that we have back home, and I really like taking the time to acknowledge all of the things that we are grateful for, to spend that time with family, and then also it's like the kickoff for the season.
Good point. It is, and it is fun just to have there's great food, there's great family, and again, taking that time just to be grateful for the things in our lives. What will we never catch you doing?
Hunting.
Oh, okay.
I can't do camo. I don't like it, and orange is not my color.
So it's really the wardrobe that keeps you out of hunting?
Yeah, and spending that many hours outdoors when it's starting to get cold, no.
Yeah, for me, I don't need to be cold. Yeah, no.
No.
Favorite book or movie?
Oh, I can't. I would say probably The Interpreter of Maladies. It's like short stories. I like the books that are more into short stories.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up. How about a guilty pleasure?
I don't think this is guilty, but a weighted blanket and chocolate.
Ooh.
Every day I will have a little bit of chocolate.
That sounds like just good self-care.
Yes.
How about next or dream travel destination?
I do have a fun trip coming up. Me and my sister, we're taking my mom for her birthday. She's turning 65 this year. So we'll be going to the Caribbean for a week just to celebrate her and
that's
celebrate
fantastic.
all of the things in our lives.
Yeah, so just the 3 of you?
Just the 3 of us.
Oh, how wonderful. You're going to love that.
Yes.
So why medicine, and what was it about being an OB/GYN that drew you in?
So my dad is a doctor. So for me, it was normal, seeing him go to clinic or sometimes even spending time in the clinic playing around with whatever was there. But my first thought when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be a dentist. I loved going to the dentist. It was fascinating to me. I was the only weird kid that loved going to the dentist. But so then I kind of knew I wanted to do something healthcare related. I absolutely love all of the standard sciences. But when I started medical school, very early on, I realized just how fascinating women's bodies are. All of the changes that we go through our lifetime, and then all of the stigma and taboo with some of these stages, like culturally, how in certain places we cannot talk about menstruation, we hide, we stop going to school on those days, or how we call it like the curse. So it was also very empowering for me to be able to see that by validating our concerns, by making women feel comfortable with these stages, that we could really give a lot back to our community, back to ourselves, and also as a discovery for me as being a woman, as I also have gone through those transitions. Sometimes you feel that you know it all, and then when I became a mom, it was a whole new world open to me. Even though I was already an OBGYN, I had been practicing for a couple of years by then. It was, okay, yes, I know that I know nothing.
You're right. That blend of like your real life experience with, practicing as a physician too, it does take on new meaning when you yourself are in that next phase of life, like motherhood, right? So, Dr. Pineda, we wanted to talk to you about perimenopause. There's a lot of, on social media, if you're a woman over the age of 30, if you don't see perimenopause like all the time in your social media feed, like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there is a lot of information out there. And so we really wanted to sit down with you as an expert and to talk more about this. So we'll start from the very beginning. What is perimenopause, and what's the difference between perimenopause and menopause?
Yes. So the easiest is menopause, right? But we cannot diagnose, I cannot see you and say, hey, you are menopausal until you have stopped seeing your periods for 12 months. And this is when it gets tricky because what if you have other factors that prevent you from seeing a period? What if you had a hysterectomy? How do you know that you have become menopausal, right? But I like to think of it more as a transition period, and that is what perimenopause is. It is all of this time frame where your body is undergoing a decline of its hormones, specifically estradiol and progesterone. So we do develop some symptoms with it, but there is not like a graduation date. Here, the graduation date is when you stop seeing your periods for 12 months. But sometimes we can do blood work. Sometimes we can do other things to try to get into a notion of that may be happening. So the best way to compare this to is when you are about to get your first period. Like, okay, you are going through puberty, but what is puberty? So it's all of those signs and symptoms of it, but you are not fully developed until you cross that threshold and you had your first period.
So it's the middle-aged puberty.
Yes.
So what's a typical age range for women to start going through this transition?
And here is one of the things that has recently been brought up to light, because we would think that the hallmark was, just having vaginal dryness and hot flashes and night sweats, that was the hallmark of menopause. But now we know that these are actually some of the later symptoms. So starting in our 40s, we do have a decline in our ovarian function. That's why we may not be ovulating regularly. That's why our cycles may start becoming a little bit irregular also, and we may experience other symptoms of decline in ovarian function, like feeling tired, feeling aches and pains in our body, feeling sore, having some of that mental fatigue and fogginess that affects us. And even though we may not be suffering terribly from this, we do.
It definitely is starting to have an impact on your life then at that point when you're noticing all of these symptoms, right?
Correct. But they are so subtle, so vague and non-specific that we tend to attribute it to just our busy lifestyles. Like, oh, it's because I didn't eat as much, or I'm not exercising,
Or I'm stressed out, or I'm running after the kids, or I'm just too busy. Yes, right? So we often think of hot flashes as kind of like a primary symptom that women suffer through, but it's not the only symptom. So you've touched on this a little bit, but what are some of those symptoms and health issues that come along with this perimenopause process?
Oh, it's basically everything in our bodies. One of the bigger ones that I want to touch on is our mental health. It is well established that about 60 to 70% of women that are going through perimenopause or the menopausal transition, they will experience either new anxiety or depression. It is huge. And sometimes we are very hard to see that on ourselves. We may also experience irritability that also comes in hand with that decrease in our sleep quality. So sometimes we may not feel that we are waking up at night or really struggling with sleep, but it is well demonstrated that the sleep quality does change. Also, we can start to have some changes in our weight, especially our waistline. Then we had talked about feeling fatigued, feeling tired. Then we can also have changes with our menstrual cycle that now becomes irregular, unpredictable, or we may start bleeding continuously.
Hormone replacement therapy. Now, that was standard practice for a long time, but it fell out of favor in about 2002, basically overnight, because of a study that pointed to an increased health risk for women. What happened? Is hormone replacement therapy safe? Is that what you would do? Is that something you prescribe now for patients? What do we need to know?
Yes, and I do want to point out that this single study, it was a huge study, okay? We are talking about thousands of women enrolled, and basically what it showed was that when we start hormone therapy on women that have already been menopausal for a long time, then it's too late. It's too late for us to safely start it. The best time for us to start hormone therapy, and by hormone therapy I want to make it specific to do estradiol or estradiol and progesterone if you still have a uterus. Starting hormone therapy as early as we start with perimenopause and menopause, then that will prevent some of the long-term cardiovascular changes that our bodies go through. But if it has already been 10 years since we started that transition, then it is not going to be safe anymore. So there are also a few contraindications for hormone therapy, and that's why it's important to talk to your doctor about it and see if this is something that you will benefit from. But for the most part, for women, yes, most women are able to do hormone replacement therapy, and it is safe for them.
Do you get patients who have a lot of concerns about the safety of hormone replacement therapy? Are they really interested in it now? Do you feel like some of that stigma around it has changed? Or do you think that people, have enough information now that they're excited and they want to start?
So I will definitely say that there has been a more positive outlook on hormones probably in the past couple of years. Yes, for a long time it was almost as if I was offering something that you would get in the streets. They were not very accepting of it, even though I knew they needed it. Or sometimes that we just want to really accept of what our body goes through. And I will say, a lot of women do not need hormone replacement therapy, just like with that puberty. Like some women do fantastic through puberty. Oh, they end up like little swans on the other side of that transition. And there's really women that just breeze through menopause. They may feel like a hot flash and they actually get just rosy cheeks and they glow. They but some women do not. And that's a good thing, that at least we have options now. And I will say that hormone therapy has also changed because we have voiced our concerns of the studies that we have, the type of preparations that we have. So hormone therapy by itself, the components that we use for it have also changed into doing something that is what our bodies produce. So we are moving away from doing synthetic hormones and doing more into what our body produces, and that's what is also commercially available.
Fantastic. So are there other treatments available? Like if I, maybe hormone replacement therapy isn't right for me. Are there other things that I could talk to my primary care provider or my OBGYN about?
Yes. So we also have medications that, even though they are antidepressants, they actually help to deal with some of the symptoms of hot flashes. And it's targeted to our symptoms. Okay. And this is one point that I do want to make with hormone replacement therapy. It's not that you need to replace what your body is missing. Like, yes, we need to face that. Yes, we are in our 50s or we are in our 60s. Like, we can't expect our body to be what it was when we were in our 40s or in our 30s. It's mostly to treat some of the symptoms that we are experiencing. Because sometimes when we go through menopause, we can feel broken. We cannot think, we cannot work, we cannot function. You don't have that control in your body. But we can also have other symptoms that sometimes it is just like, I don't want my partner to touch me because it just hurts. And yes, we do have alternatives to treat this, hormonal and non-hormonal. Other changes, and we do have some medications that are now, one medication in particular that is now in the market that is just for the treatment of hot flashes. It doesn't.
That's great.
Yes. And this is non-hormonal. We've been waiting for this medication for years now. And the data is very promising. And from experience, yes, it can be life-changing.
So great. So there are options. So you need, it's again, like every woman's timeline is going to be a little different. Everyone's symptoms are going to be a little bit different. So good to have these discussions with your OB provider, OBGYN, to talk about, what's going on and what's going to be right for you. I see a lot on social media about women and their nutritional needs changing during this time of life. And, back to your puberty analogy, like that kind of makes sense because your body is going through this big transition. You see things like increase your protein, increase fiber, eat more magnesium, take vitamin D, etc. Is this legitimate? Like, what's the nutritional advice you give to your patients? And do you have specific nutritional advice that you give to patients at this time of their lives?
Oh, fiber for sure. And I think we all benefit from having more fiber in our diets. Our American diet is devoid of fiber. We should be eating close to 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. And this is also one of the reasons why we have such a high risk for colorectal cancer, because we don't get enough fiber in our diets. Also, eating less processed foods, increasing our protein, and this goes in hand with doing different kinds of physical activity, and I'll touch a little bit more into that in a few minutes. And then the types of fats that we are using. So decreasing our processed foods will also decrease some of those unwanted fats, but really paying attention to our omega-3s, and it doesn't have to be something really rigorous or strict. Just move away from processed foods, eating fruits, veggies, that will increase your fiber. And then when we are increasing our protein, you can go with plant-based protein. So chickpeas, lentils, beans, those are great sources of fiber and protein. But it's okay to also eat your animal fats, if that's what you like. And then just eating a variety of foods that are not processed, fresh.
Good advice for patients of all ages.
Yes. No, it really isn't that complicated. And also increasing our calcium intake. This is a big one. Just in a day-to-day, it is hard for us to get all of our calcium requirements. Most of us really try to stay away from dairy, or it doesn't sit well with us. We would have to eat a lot of almonds to get all of the calcium, and we would probably get a lot of pounds on if we ate all of our calcium through almonds alone. But kale is another good source of calcium. So considering adding a calcium supplement. Now, that's why it's important to talk to your doctor about this, because excess of calcium can also lead to undesired effects like calcium deposits in our arteries or making kidney stones. So there's got to be a balance. So it's why you have to have that conversation and really evaluate, like, okay, am I getting enough from my diet? Yes or no?
Great advice. Any particular vitamins or supplements that you talk to your patients about or they have questions about?
Yeah, so calcium is a big one, and I do try to assess this every time that you come in for a well woman check. Also, vitamin D. It's hard for us to get our vitamin D, especially in the winter months. So adding that can be beneficial. Then magnesium, this is one where there's a lot out there. Like, oh, it will help with your sleep, and most of the time, our sleep at this point is way past magnesium, but I don't think that it's going to hurt. And I don't see anything like really bad with taking a multivitamin. Just probably, if you like having that little vitamin that has your name on it and was specially crafted for you, go ahead. But most of the time we don't really have to do anything that complicated. We just have to have a healthy, balanced diet, eating some meats, fruits, veggies, and making sure that we do decrease the amount of processed foods.
You talked about this just a little bit. What about lifestyle modifications? You briefly mentioned exercise. What would you say to your patients about exercise during perimenopause?
So our body will change during menopause. We do know that there are pathways where our energy, it gets stored in our abdominal circumference, that is in our waistline, ladies. So it will happen. Okay, so the amount of muscle that we have in our body decreases with each passing decade that we live. So that is huge. That means that at 40 we start out with an amount of muscle that by the time that we are 60, we are going to have very little of that muscle left. That's why when we think of an older woman, we think like, oh, we are frail. And that's what we need to focus on, decreasing that frailty as we grow older. How are we going to do that? Oh, we gotta exercise. And lifting weights is actually something that will help prevent some of that. Also, that's why it's so important for us to increase our protein, because it will help us build that muscle. But we really need to do the work. If we just pack our protein and we don't build it, you turn that into fat. But other lifestyle modifications, sleep is a pillar of our health. So that's why I think it goes awry for a lot of women, is that we're not sleeping well. And we're not sleeping well because of our menopausal symptoms. So the first thing that I work on repairing is our sleep. If you can't sleep, you're broken. Then you start getting irritable. You cannot function. You cannot think. Now you're anxious about how are you going to function the following day. And it's terrible. And you cannot get along with anyone well if you haven't slept.
That is true. That's true.
Oh, and then that makes you eat more, because now you have not released enough leptin. You don't feel full after your meals. And it is well demonstrated that when we haven't slept well, we think that we have like a free pass of like, I'm going to eat whatever because I haven't slept.
You're so right. Yeah, it does. You're right. When we don't have that good foundation of sleep to start our day, it does. It impacts everything else throughout your day.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, and then going with also certain things that we know that work. So let's say we're just having mild to moderate hot flashes. It is well demonstrated that women that exercise regularly cope better with hot flashes. It's not that it makes them less obnoxious. It's just that we are at a better place to handle that. Also, things like massage therapy, meditation. It's not that it's going to cure you from your hot flashes, but it will help you cope with them a little bit better, okay?
What about routine lab work? Is that something that you would do with these patients? Patients throughout their life, we need to be keeping track of like cholesterol and our A1C and things like that. But are there reasons why women who are perimenopausal need to come in to get their lab work done annually?
Yes, we should. And we should continue to do all of our routine prevention screenings. It is important before we start any hormone therapy to do a cardiovascular risk assessment. The reason for this is because, depending on that, it may be contraindicated to do any hormone therapy. Also, a lot of us, we think like, in our 30s, we normally don't see our doctors very regularly unless we're very sick, or we just see them because we're bringing our kids to the doctor, or we see our OBGYN because we had a baby, or we just want contraception. Most of the time, we're fine in our 30s. Then in our 40s, we're still fine most of the time, and that's when we really need to start having those conversations, if we have not before, of getting into care. This is when we need to actively screen for hypertension, diabetes. This is when, if we don't go to the doctor, we can make it through a few years without being diagnosed. So yes, it is important to continue the well woman visits and also to see our primary care. Now, doing blood work to check our hormones, well, not so much, because we can be perimenopausal and our hormones may still be normal.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. That's not what I expected you to say.
Yes, because our ovarian function, it's not like someone turned off the switch. It is because you can have an egg here and there. I like to call them the rogue eggs that all of a sudden decide to come out and like, hey, you haven't graduated yet. I'm still working. I'm still producing. Here, I have one for you. And then you end up with, you were almost like 8 months into being menopausal, and all of a sudden, boom, we reset the clock. So that's why it is important. And also, we need to remember about endometrial cancer. Endometrial cancer is a very common gynecologic malignancy, and a lot of the times the only symptom that we get is just bleeding. So in our 40s, especially after the age of 45, if we have new onset bleeding, persistent bleeding, heavy bleeding, then we need to have that evaluation to make sure that there really isn't anything else that's leading to this bleeding, and not just disregarded, well, I've been bleeding irregularly for a while. Yes, that could be the case, but there's newer pathology that arises once we're in our 40s.
So absolutely make those annual appointments, even if things are going well, again, because you're probably catching all those things early when there's a lot of interventions that can still happen.
Oh, yes. And also for you to be prepared of what's to come. I don't want to say that it's all doom and gloom as we head into our 40s. It really is not. But just to be aware of what can happen with your body. I hear it very often. I thought I was crazy. Really, it's making sense. But the thing is that we like to attribute everything that has happened to us, but sometimes it's just hard to put all of the links together. And yes, you can feel like you're not yourself when things start changing very drastically.
Wow. So good. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I think it will just make a lot of women feel, more validated and more eager to talk to their primary care provider about being like, well, all these different things kind of seem to be going on. Because again, you're right. We may not be piecing them together because we are chalking them up to all these other things. Weight gain. It's really common to hear about women gaining weight or finding it harder to lose weight. What's that conversation like that you have with your patients about weight gain?
Yes. So basically it is on addressing what it is that we're eating, what things are working for us, what things are not. I cannot say that, oh no, you are not going to gain any weight at all. No, there is going to be a change, just like when we are pregnant, or just like when we go from when we were a teenager and now we're in our mid-20s. Like, our bodies will change. So there are certain things that we do need to embrace and give ourselves a lot of grace about this, because yes, we are growing. We are growing older, also wiser. But yeah, I would say really work on that exercise, that sleep, and that diet. This is like our good last chance for us to rid of our bad habits. I think that like our 20s, yes, we make a lot of mistakes. Our body is very graceful with us. Then in our 30s is when we need to start to build up our foundation of good habits of sleep, exercise, diet. In our 40s, we really need to now keep on building on those. And then that's what we are going to reap the greatest when we are in our 50s, 60s, and 70s.
What about the impacts on a woman's sexual health? Is this something that patients are eager to talk to you about, or they avoid talking to you about? Because surely, again, there have to be changes impacting her sexual life at this point.
Oh, I will ask. If we don't ask, we don't know. And it's okay if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, then I won't pry. But the thing is that yes, a lot of the times there can be dryness, discomfort. It's just painful. And our body tries to protect itself. When things are not feeling great and they are painful, we avoid it. That's just how we are wired. And it shouldn't be that way. Sex is still important when we are in our 40s, in our 50s, in our 60s. You would be surprised how many couples are still active. And some people are okay with, if they're not, they're happy with that, to each his own. But if it is something that it still interests you, then yes, we should definitely talk about that. And there are other things that we can do. Sometimes it is not just pain, but also the desire is gone. Like, who took it away? And there are things that we can do to help improve that and boost that. One of the bigger things is ourselves. When we start to put on a little bit of weight and we are not sleeping great, we just don't feel sexy. We don't feel sensual anymore. And it's more ourselves preventing us from that.
You're right.
Desire.
Just like you talked about that mental health aspect of these changes, right? It has to be a huge part of this too for women. That again, if your brain has that disconnect from your body, you're just not going to, be excited to be having sex or to be intimate with a partner, right? During menopause and after menopause, do I still need PAPs? Do I still need annual screenings? Like, when do I get to give up on the PAP test then?
Okay, so you cannot graduate until you are 65 from pap smears, but that doesn't mean that you should not come in for your annual checks and also your well woman visits. So what is a pap test? So a pap smear is a test for cervical cancer screening. That is when we do that swab of the cervix, and sometimes we get a pelvic exam without getting a pap smear. And the age of 65 is when we stop doing that screening, and we need to meet certain strict criteria in order for you to graduate, okay? That means that you've always had normal pap smears, you have kept up to date with all of your screens, and you've never had anything out of the ordinary, okay? Then, yes, at 65, you graduate from those. But we do still recommend for you to continue to come to care because there are newer symptoms that arise after menopause, newer chronic conditions. So things like yeast infections, those are not common at that age. If you are also having new vaginal bleeding, please also come in. We address other aspects of our health in those years, such as bone health. We do DEXA screens. Make sure that you are also up to date with your colorectal cancer screening.
Excellent. Other key things women should know. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you would want people to know?
Nothing is too embarrassing to talk about. So speak up. Like, I think this is one of the biggest reasons menopause has been neglected for a long time. A lot of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, they were too afraid to talk about it. I think culturally it was also something, a feeling that once you go through menopause, like, you don't exist anymore, that you lost relevance because I don't know. I cannot speak for what the mindset was back then, but I think that if we really don't talk about these things, we don't create awareness of them, then we cannot address it.
Right. I think so much of it was, it's something that all women have to go through. And so you just have to suffer through it, and you just have to, put up with it. And it is what it is, and there's not much you can do about it. Right. And that's just not the case, and if you have a good relationship with your provider and you can talk about these things in a way that's free of judgment, it makes everything better, because there are options, there are treatments, and there are solutions.
Yes. And a lot of the times you may not really need any medications. It's just that reassurance that, yes, you are okay. We are going to get through this. Like, maybe doing some minor tweaks here and there, because there are things that we can do to help mitigate some of those hot flashes, like wearing layers, preventing those drastic changes in temperature that when the summer comes along, like, you go from being super hot outside, then temperature of 64 when you walk in.
When you freeze inside in the air conditioning.
Yes. Also, certain things, we just accept that they are normal. Like, it is the middle of winter and you're almost naked outside.
Yeah.
Something's going on.
Yep. It's time to talk to your doctor. Thank you so much for talking with us today. It was an excellent conversation, and we really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me anytime.